Magic Johnson versus Larry Bird, McDonald's versus Burger King, Deep Impact versus Armageddon, great rivalries in the annals of American pop culture. And we can add to that the rivalry between The Lord of the Rings of Power from Amazon, and HBO Max's spin-off series, House of the Dragon. Unfortunately, well, at least for Rings of Power, it's not really a contest at this point. If you look at the consumer reaction, it tells you right then and there that people are happy with HBO Max and House of the Dragon and are very, very dissatisfied with Amazon's The Lord of the Rings of Power. It's unfortunate for Amazon that both of the shows, which are courting essentially the same audience, came out about the exact same time. And there's clearly one winner at this point, just as far as interest, who's happy. And there are a lot of things going into this and why House of the Dragon has absolutely destroyed the Rings of Power at this point. We know that Amazon is already making big changes. The rumors are out there that the showrunners have been put to the side. They've decided to bring in some people that maybe have a little bit of experience actually creating a TV show that's successful. These guys came from J.J. Abrams' Bad Robot. That probably tells you everything you need to know about everything that has failed with the Rings of Power. Me personally, I made it through the first 2 episodes, which I reviewed here on the channel, and they weren't very good. They weren't very engaging, and they were taking absolute liberties with the source material from J.R.R. Tolkien. I did not like that. I was not impressed, and I did not go back for a second helping. When it comes to House of the Dragon, it's a different story. I watched the first episode, pretty good. I watched the second episode, pretty good. I made it all the way to the finale, and I planned on watching the second episode. A lot of people in the media have gone out there and started to spin the reason that people have not reacted kindly to Amazon's Lord of the Rings of Power is because of all the race swaps that it's too woke. But I don't know, if you watch the House of the Dragon, there's race swaps in there. Feels pretty woke. It's definitely got some themes and talking points about the matriarchy versus the patriarchy and all that kind of stuff. But the difference is the creators behind HBO Max's House of the Dragons actually haven't really taken liberties all that much with the source material. If you go back and read the histories created by George R.R. Martin, pretty much every major event that leads up to this big war that's about to happen within the Targaryen family is covered. It's presented. Now, they might have changed a few things here and there, whether or not the death of the son and the dragon and all that stuff was actually an accident. I don't think that was actually covered in the source material. They've changed it a little bit, but for the most part, they've stayed faithful to the original materials, and they didn't bore anybody to tears. I think that's the biggest part. There's a coherent, concise narrative that you can watch in House of the Dragon, and it makes sense, and you can engage with the story. From what I saw in the 2 episodes of Amazon's The Rings of Power, it was not concise, it wasn't coherent, and it certainly wasn't engaging. They were jumping all over the place. I don't even know how time worked in that TV show. Nothing made sense, and they certainly took a ton of liberties and bastardized J.R.R. Tolkien's work. Amazon tried to claim initially, and the media tried to back them up on it, that it's this huge success. It's the most successful show in Amazon history, but they still will not talk about the actual viewership numbers and how many people actually stayed to the end of the program. Something was suspiciously absent from Amazon's quarterly earnings release Thursday. Any new viewership numbers on its prestige Lord of the Rings series, The Rings of Power. It's been 3 weeks since the first season of the show, which cost over $450 million to make, concluded on October 14th. Amazon has yet to release any viewership numbers on the finale, and the earnings release published Thursday repeated a vague stat that the company first teased more than 3 weeks prior. On October 4th, Amazon Studios boss Jennifer Salke said in a Variety cover story that the show is cresting toward 100 million customers having watched it. And what is interesting is they still use that vague statement in the quarterly earnings report, even though it came out 3 weeks after the statement had been made the first time. Meaning, in 3 weeks, they still haven't crossed 100 million viewers yet. And let's not kid ourselves. With the amount of feedback, negative feedback, that Amazon and the Rings of Power's creators got from the fans regarding the quality of the show and them not wanting to see it, if this thing really was breaking records, was absolutely destroying everything that Amazon had ever created, they would be touting the numbers from the rooftops. They would talk about it until your ears fell off, to talk about how successful it was, in spite of all the haters out there saying that they didn't like the show. In fact, when they get the numbers wrong for Thursday Night Football, which premiered on Amazon this season, when those Nielsen viewer numbers are wrong, Amazon has come out and corrected them multiple times now. I think 4 or 5 times at least that they have come out and corrected the viewership numbers that Nielsen has stated regarding Thursday Night Football. Yet, they refuse to do that with Amazon's Rings of Power. If this thing was anywhere close to the success that they thought it would be and would like to tout that it actually is, they would actually let us know. There is a precedent when you get the numbers wrong on one of their big properties that they spent a lot of money on, and they spent more money on Thursday Night Football to acquire those rights than they did for Lord of the Rings the first season. They correct the record because they want people to know that it's been successful. But at this point, they said a few things that are very vague, not contextualize anything. And 3 weeks ago, they said, we're getting towards 100 million viewers. 3 weeks later, they still haven't got there. The growing silence on Amazon's part begs the question as to whether the company saw a drop-off of viewers after the 2-episode premiere. Amazon said Rings of Power in its first 2 months had driven more Prime signups globally than any other Amazon original. Still, Google Trends data shows House of the Dragon exceeded Rings of Power in interest after each episode premiered, and the latter's peak interest was far below the former. The difference in interest in both series was also reflected in social media conversation. The House of the Dragon hashtag on TikTok has over 7 billion views, while the Rings of Power hashtag has nearly 800 million. Despite what the shill media would like you to believe, that people just want to talk about what they don't like and complain about things that they didn't even watch, when people see things and they're excited about it, they actually like to go on social media and spread the word and say, you know what? I watched House of the Dragon and it was absolutely amazing. They don't go out there and say, I watched The Rings of Power and it was amazing, because it wasn't. Mostly people are joking about it because at this point, it is the living embodiment of a meme itself. It's the worst thing that can happen to a property that you like growing up. Anything from Tolkien's work that people actually like, they've actually just discarded, and they've taken the worst things possible, taken all the characters that you love, distorted them, twisted them, bastardized them, spit them out and said, why didn't you like this? And when you go on social media, it's pretty much radio silent when it comes to the Rings of Power, unless people are making fun of it. That is not a good place to be. You want to be where the House of the Dragon is, where people are excited about the show. They want to see the second season of it, and they're really excited about the story that's being told. When it comes to the Rings of Power, people want to know who got fired. What changes are they going to make before they go into production on season 2? Because you can't continue to do what you did in season 1 because it was so unsuccessful. Another notable contrast to the other blockbuster fantasy series of the moment, HBO's House of the Dragon, the Game of Thrones spinoff grew its weekly viewership substantially early on before plateauing around the same level of viewing time as Rings of Power. Prime Video's user base is far, far larger than that of HBO Max. The fact that the latter series has equaled or surpassed Rings in viewing time becomes much more impressive. When you look at the subscriber numbers, the base subscriber users, the amount of people that actually have access to the Rings of Power in comparison to House of the Dragon, it's absolutely insane to even fathom that House of the Dragon could come close to equaling, if not surpassing, what Rings of Power has been able to do on Amazon Prime. HBO Max would like to be a competitor for Netflix, Amazon, Disney Plus, but let's be honest, at this point, they really aren't. That's why they're doing all these changes over at Warner Brothers Discovery, because they've realized their strategy didn't work and they never really substantially grew their subscriber base. Whereas Amazon Prime, they give those memberships away like they're Halloween candy, you know what I mean? The left, right, and center. Everyone has access to Amazon Prime. I have access to Amazon Prime and I don't pay for it. It just came with, my cellular service. I actually have to go out there and pay for HBO Go because here in the Philippines, we don't have HBO Max. It's like a light version of the Max streaming service, with less options and less shows and stuff. House of the Dragon is on there, and I can tell you right now, I feel like I got my money's worth out of HBO Go, but I certainly didn't get my money's worth out of Amazon Prime, and I didn't pay for that shit. I watched 2 episodes of something that were so boring, so tedious. I can't believe people even came back for a third helping of Rings of Power. It was that boring. Yes, it had high production values, but the story itself pretty much sucked from start to finish of those first 2 episodes. And I'm not surprised in the end that the viewership declined over time for Rings of Power while it ascended for the House of the Dragon. They both have good production values, but one of them has a good, engaging story. One of them has characters you can relate to. Even if they're doing things that maybe you don't like, you can understand why they're doing it. If you go to the Rings of Power, I don't even know why any of the stuff was happening. I don't know how time worked there. I might not have liked all the time jumps that were going on in House of the Dragon, but at least I understood the narrative of the story and how it all worked together. You can't say that about the Rings of Power. And that's why at this point, House of the Dragon has embarrassed the Rings of Power by essentially every metric that you could even think of at this point. More social media engagement, bigger viewership, more people searching out information on the series itself. Amazon has been trying to hide, with the help of the shill media, the failure that is their Rings of Power series for a long time, but I've discussed this. I broke it all down. Why they're trying to hide it, how the shill media are trying to help them do it. Absolutely disgusting stuff. If you ask me, if you haven't seen this, definitely check this one out. I made it directly for you. If you don't see it here, there's also a link in the video description.